Happy Halloween, folks, and welcome to the first NHL mock draft of the NHL season. With the first chunk of NHL games out of the way, we have a lot of questions to answer today. Who has the best odds for the first overall pick? Which team actually wins first overall? And what could the NHL draft order look like if it happened today? Well, make sure you watch till the end because we're going to be going through the complete mock draft of the lottery simulation and the lottery picks all throughout the top 16. So make sure you watch till the end for all the prospect talk and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year. Now, looking at the NHL Draft Lottery order, right now the San Jose Sharks have the best odds for first overall. Not really too surprising, but then after that, you got a ton of surprises. You got teams like Pittsburgh, you got teams like Nashville, the Islanders, the Bruins, the Oilers, and even further down the list, the Colorado Avalanche, who are in the playoffs. We have Philadelphia with their pick. And then you got a team at the end at number 16 with the Chicago Blackhawks having 2 picks inside the top 16. So we got a lot to figure out here with the Draft Lottery simulation, but let's just get right into it. With simming the lottery, we have a pretty funky result because the San Jose Sharks do win first overall, but we have the Philadelphia Flyers rising to second overall, getting some lottery luck, and the Pittsburgh Penguins dropping to number 3. Honestly, though, we didn't really need much lottery surprises because already the teams that are in the lottery are surprises enough. Especially with how this draft is looking with so many top end forwards, there's going to be a lot of difference, I think, in the rankings this year. I think for a lot of these top end teams, especially that we're expecting to make the playoffs, there is some great quality here that could really rejuvenate your team. But let's get started, shall we? Getting inside the top 16, it should come as no surprise that this is where the San Jose Sharks will select James Hagens. I think he is still by far the #1 player in this draft class. There's been a lot of talk over Porter Martone and Michael Misa, and rightfully so. They've had great starts to the season, but I don't think anybody is capable of what James Hagens is capable of. You can see as a 5'10 centerman, I think San Jose has the conversation about Porter Martone, considering they already have Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini, but honestly, I think Will Smith could have the case be better on the wing in the future, and Hagens is somebody that I just don't think you're going to be able to pass up. He has started out the NCAA season still great with BC. In 4 games, has 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points, has been creating so much with players like Cutter Gauthier and Ryan Leonard, and it has just been so much fun to watch. I think the reason we're seeing so much conversation around that first overall pick is simply because James Hagens is playing as expected, while players like Porter Martone and Michael Misa are vastly exceeding the expectations coming into the year. But the expectations for Hagens were brilliant, and I think he's meeting them, and I think he has been on that exceptional level for BC, and I think will continue to be. The vision, the creativity, the speed at which he plays the game, all of it is so elite and about as good as you can ask for in a center package. He's right up that Jack Hughes alley, and for San Jose, having him and Celebrini, I think is just too good to ever think about passing up on. I want to blame San Jose for going in a different direction. Porter Martone will be my only other choice for them, but Hagens, to me, is the obvious answer. Which leads us on to second overall, and the Philadelphia Flyers, who rise up a spot, get some lottery luck, and will have an opportunity to get a franchise player for them. They already got Matvei Michkov, and they got Jet Luchenko in this last draft, but to me, I think they're going to want to get this great, really game-changing centerman, and I think Michael Misa, outside of Hagens, is the best choice. I think some of us were kind of cautious on Misa coming into the season with some of the pedestrian stretches he had last year. He was somebody I think really needed to prove himself, and so far he absolutely has been. You can see with Saginaw this year in 13 games, he has 17 goals, 9 assists for 26 points. I mean, prolific doesn't even begin to describe how good Misa has been in the OHL this year. He has been dynamic, and I think for Philly, he's exactly what the doctor ordered. I love Jet Luchenko. I wasn't surprised to see him in the NHL. He has such a mature mold already, but Michael Misa to me can be that first line center, and a true one at that can drive play at the NHL level. The smarts are really the big thing that Misa has that has always stood out. He is just such a compact, such a simple player when he needs to be, but he's able to stretch himself when the game calls for it. He's somebody that does have that skill. I think is using it more this season, and we're seeing the results come from it. I don't think there's this serious edge in Misa's game, but I think Porter Martone would just be adding to riches. I think they still need to build that center group before they think about the wings. And I think for Misa, he could play both, but I think is pretty naturally a good fit as a centerman going forward. Next up, let's move on to third overall and go on to the other team in Pennsylvania in the Pittsburgh Penguins. They got a honestly, pretty easy decision to make. If they don't draft Porter Martone, I'm going to be kind of confused, honestly. To me, he is a perfect fit for what Pittsburgh needs in that prospect pool and what they could use going forward. I mean, you look at Rucker McGrody and basically think about Rucker McGrody on steroids with much better skating, much better pace, and just a lot more comfortability against high-end pressure. Porter Martone is just an absolute beaut, though. I mean, his start to the season offensively has been unreal. In 11 games, he has 12 goals, 13 assists, 25 points. unbelievable. Plus, he's already the captain for his OHL team in Brampton, which is a pretty nice thing to see too at 18 years old. Porter Martone is just ridiculous with just how much pace he can provide while also bringing the edge that will just make him so bad to play against if you're on the opposing team. You're going to want to have him on your team, and I think Pittsburgh is not going to ever be in a bad position with him at 3rd overall. But this to me, after the top 3, is where the draft can go in any single direction. I think this top 16 really was affected by team needs, especially with a lot of these contending teams that are in the bottom 16 that are going to want to improve in individual positions. It makes things funky. At number 4, though, we got the Chicago Blackhawks, so I think are in a weird position with this pick because I think Porter Martone would be pretty easily the pick if he were to be available for Chicago. After that, though, I'm not really sure who they'd go for, but I think the most obvious answer is Roger McQueen, who I think brings some size that Chicago is going to want to add in this draft. I think that is going to be the big thing for them, especially on the forward group, is adding some big bulk, and Roger McQueen does bring that. At 6'5", 192 pounds, he started out the WHL season absolutely insane, has kind of cooled off a little bit since then, but still is a goal per game, 8 goals, 11 points in 8 games played. I will say though, I think the big thing that could hold this pick back is that he reminds me a lot of Kirby Dach, and I'm not sure if Chicago is going to want to go in that same direction. He's very inconsistent, but has his moments. He can sometimes be a physical force. He can sometimes drive play so well and use his skating in a good direction and get in front of the net and knock in goals whenever possible. He's someone that I think has a lot of potential, but again, is something you're going to have to really develop to get there. I still like him a lot because of that potential, but it is a big swing. But I think at this point in the rebuild for Chicago, they might as well go for those big swings and try to make something work. Another thing that could hold the pick back is that I think Roger McQueen will most likely succeed as a centerman, but I could see a situation where Chicago puts Nazar or even a Oliver Moore on the wing someday, and I think they might still want to have the strength and opportunities and options on the center group going forward that McQueen would provide. Next up, we're going into the Nashville Predators, and do I see this being this similar position draft-wise by the end of the year? No, I see Nashville eventually making the playoffs, but it is fun to see them in this spot as of now. Because that means I think they're going to line up, run to the podium to select Matthew Schaefer, who is, for a lot of people, the premier top-end defenseman of this 2025 NHL draft. And there's a lot of reasons to see that. At 6'2", 183 pounds, he's somebody that I think is due for an improving year. Unfortunately, got diagnosed with mono right before the season, which took him out for a little bit. And of course, his recovery will be something to keep an eye on throughout the start of this season. But so far, offensively, he ain't done too bad. In 3 games, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points. About as good as you could expect from a September birthday draft year defenseman. Still, Schaefer, with the puck skills he has, with the confidence that he's really acquired over the last year, he's somebody that has just gotten better and better at that. We saw just how good he was at the World Juniors, the U18 level for Canada, where he was just absolutely insane. He's somebody that I think has so much potential to show off this season, and I think Nashville's really going to love him on that defense. You also got Tanner Molendyk there too, and you're going to have some really good puck movers coming up for the Preds. I know there'd be people out there questioning it because they already have Roman Josi. Why would the Preds want to add 2 more premier puck movers on the left side? Well, Roman Josi's 34 years old. He's not going to be there forever, and I think Nashville needs to start planning accordingly for that next generation. Next up, let's go on to number 6, and the New York Islanders picking at this spot. They could easily go for a forward, but I think the most Lou Lamoriello thing to do is to go for a defenseman, but I honestly think in their prospect pool, they could use a good puck mover, and to me, Logan Hensler makes so much sense. Now, there's a few connections here already. They already got Quinn Finley, leading scorer for the Badgers this year. He's an Islanders prospect, so they already got this Wisconsin connection going, but Logan Hensler is somebody that I think is going to get a bad rap throughout this year just because of how bad Wisconsin is, man. I've watched every single game of this Badger season, and I intend to make a video later down the line when I cover all of Hensler's game. But you can see so far, the stats haven't been insane. In 6 games, he has 1 assist, 1 point, is a -6. But when I tell you that the Badgers have been cataclysmically bad throughout this season, I'm not telling you any lies. They have been so horrible, so inept from offense. Hensler has set up so many chances, has had so many good defensive plays, but it always seems like bad things happen to the players around him, and Hensler can never catch a break. But I think there's a lot to like here with his skating, his first pass ability, especially the work in his own zone, getting the puck out and using his skating to really bulldog the puck and create offense from that. He's somebody that I think just has a lot of potential to be this solid all-around two-way defenseman. I don't think he's going to ever wow you with his skill, but he has his moments, but especially that skating and how fluent it is, how flawless it is in all situations, I think is a reason why the Islanders especially are going to like him so much. I don't see Hensler being this premier point-getting defenseman, but I think as this overall D that you can put in all situations, Hensler is just going to get the job done, and pretty quietly. Next up, let's move on to number 7, and this is where the Boston Bruins go, and I was kind of all over the board on who I saw the Bruins taking, but I think Anton Lundell makes a lot of sense for them. Plus, they aren't afraid to go for Swedes in the first round recently. Fabian Lysell, of course, is the most recent example, but I think they're going to want to build up this center group. They got Lin Lotono in the last draft, and I think Frondell will be an excellent addition on top of that. Obviously, his start to the season hasn't been great, but he dealt with an injury to start things out, and is getting back into the swing of things. 4 points in 6 games isn't very impressive in the junior 20, but I think in Frondell's case, he's somebody that's kind of along that same line as Misa, where a lot of his opportunities, a lot of his chances are driven by his smarts, by his intuition, and I think that's something that the Bruins especially are really going to like. There is a little bit of an edge as well to Frondell with the physical play he provides. He's somebody that does already have a very mature build, and I think that's something the Bruins especially are going to love. The question will be how much offense is there. He's kind of up that Anton Lundell angle, both Antons, coincidentally enough, but I think he's somebody that will be able to overcome that, and especially with how well the Bruins develop their players, I think Frondell is going to be perfect in that system. Next up, let's go on to number 8 and the Edmonton Oilers. We'll see if this position sticks with the McDavid injury. It's obviously not going to help things too much. I don't see the Oilers still being in this position, but at number 8, I think they're going to go for Radivojevic. Of course, he's somebody that's been really rising up the ranks over the last few months in draft rankings. He's somebody that I could pretty easily see being inside the top 10 by the time the season is done. But the more I watch Merca, the more I could absolutely see why. He's somebody that at 6'6", 198 pounds, is an absolute beefcake, and is also pretty young too. A June birth date, 17 years old. He's somebody that I think has done well in Czechia so far. Offensively, I don't think he's going to be putting up many points, but has 1 point in 10 games. But the real value, I think, is going to be the sturdy defensive play, the quick habits, and I think he's somebody that as a defenseman can skate so well. He reminds me of Simishev a lot back in his draft year, where the skating was a big strength. How he uses it was a question, and you wanted to see more improvements at that, but the potential there was great as this defensive defenseman of the future. And I think for the Oilers, this is exactly the type of player they need more of in their system. Bo Akey is really the only other defenseman I think has clear NHL potential, but Merca could really change that and bring some defense that Edmonton clearly needs. Next up, let's move on to number 9 and the Montreal Canadiens. Of course, in this spot, this is not where the Habs wanted to be, but I'm not really surprised if they end up in this similar position by the time the season is done. I think with how much they built their core already, they're going to want to add some complementary pieces in this draft, and I think Malcolm Spence at 9th overall will be perfect in that role. Spence to me is just your prototypical player who will forecheck, who will do the dirty work to create for the top end players on your team, and I think Spence would fit pretty perfectly in that position for Montreal. He's somebody that already with Erie has played pretty well in 12 games, 5 goals, 9 assists, 14 points. I think he's somebody that already has that drive, that physical edge, and is able to drive the net so well. He's somebody that I do want to see maybe show more individual talents, but I think as a complementary player, he's going to be perfect in that position, and at 9th overall, I don't think that's a bad pick whatsoever. Now, finishing off the top 10 here, we got the Buffalo Sabres, another team in that Atlantic that does not want to be in this position by the season's end. But to me, I think just like Montreal, they're going to be in this similar position. I think they're going to want to go for perfect complementary guys. I think Lyndon Lakovic really fits that role for the Sabres. First, I think they're going to want to go for some size, just like Chicago. Lakovic is just such a good physical force. He's something that can knock players off pucks, can just be so good in all situations. And I think he's somebody that, especially as a mobile power forward, is going to be able to pretty easily translate that to the NHL level. I don't see him being this amazing point producer, but I think you could see maybe a 40-point middle six player that could go up in the lineup if you need him to, play in all positions, and you can see how he's done so far with Moose Jaw so far in 15 games, 7 goals, 12 assists, 19 points, already a solid start, but I could definitely see him rising up draft boards to be in the top 10 by the end of the year. I mean, he's already 9th by elite prospects. At number 11 for the Detroit Red Wings, usually in their drafts, they like to kind of galaxy brain things, but I think in this draft, they're going to go a little bit more simple and just go for one of the best players available. And at number 11, I think that is Victor Eklund. Now, obviously, the Swedish thing is something that Detroit always loves to go for, something that is a tip in Eklund's cap. But I think in Eklund's case, he's somebody that could fill a lot of roles for Detroit going forward. As a left wing, he's somebody that I think could provide some stability, especially on a middle six offensively. He's somebody that, compared to his brother, I think is a lot more physically oriented. He's not this big player or anything. He's 5'11", but he's somebody that does love to drive the net, does love to have this knack for goal scoring. While I think Eklund him as a little bit more of a playmaker in his draft year. You can see so far in the Ihs-Wozniak, amazing production against really good pro competition, underrated competition. He has in 13 games, 7 goals, 4 assists, 11 points, having a really solid start to the year. And I would not be surprised if he's in the top 10 by the end of things, but I think at number 11, that's a solid pick for their wings. They love to draft in the Ihs-Wozniak though. I mean, you had Michael Branzig-Newgard in that same league last year, and Eklund, I think, is maybe even a tip above that in terms of offensive level at the NHL. Next, we go on to 12th overall, and this is originally the Colorado Avalanche's pick, but of course it goes to the Flyers now, so they get 2 picks inside the top 12, not too shabby. Of course, originally they would pick Michael Misa, and I think pretty naturally they're going to go for a defenseman with their second pick, and I think it will be Kashan Aitchison out of the OHL. Now, with Barrie this season, he's had a pretty solid start. In 10 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points, but the points numbers aren't going to be what Aitchison is really going to be excelling at most likely at the NHL level. It's the edge, and this is something that with Misa isn't quite there. So I think they're going to make up for it in their second pick with Aitchison, who is just physical as can be, is somebody that is just trying to be as violent as possible too. Reminds me a lot of E.J. Emery from last year's draft. So if you like that type of player, you're going to like Aitchison quite a bit. And I don't think there's a lot of top-end violent defensemen in this draft class too, which I think will naturally raise Aitchison's stock. Next up, we go into 13th overall in the Anaheim Ducks, and in this position, I think they're going to go for another QMJHLer. They love to go out of the queue, but I think this next pick is going to be Justin Carbonneau. I think for the Ducks, they're another team that wanted to see some big increases, but at 13th overall, honestly, that's a pretty big jump from where they've been in the draft before. I think Carbonneau is another very solid complementary player. He's something that I think will be really interesting if he does end up making it to the NHL level, because there are some pretty obvious holes, but man, this guy can just be such a powerhouse offensively, especially on the power play, and he would be so good with the playmakers there with the Ducks. You can see so far in 13 QMJHL games, he has 8 goals, 11 assists, 19 points. I don't think there's much offense there, and I don't think he's much of a transition player, but once play is established in the NHL zone, you're going to be able to get Carbonneau in those offensive positions, in those goal-scoring positions, and Carbonneau is so good at getting to those good spots and making things happen. If he has a good creator next to him, Carbonneau is going to be dangerous. Which leads me on to my next pick, and we're actually going to go on to a big creator in the QMJHL. We have the St. Louis Blues with this next spot, but I think Caleb Denoyer is a pretty obvious pick. Not only do the Blues love to go out of the QMJHL, they love to go out of the QMJHL and get centers too, and I think Denoyer is not just fitting and checking those boxes, but I think he's also a very powerful prospect in his own right. He's something that I think is really underrated and is my top Q prospect in this draft. You can see at 6'2", 179 pounds. He's something that this year in the QMJHL has gotten off to a pretty good start. In 10 games, 6 goals, 8 assists for 14 points, has been a leader for that Moncton team in a lot of different ways. But I think Denoyer is just so good at creating play by himself, so good at getting a pass opposition, using his speed, using his quick decision making, and that's something that isn't quite abundant in the QMJHL. So it does set him apart, but I think for the Blues, they're going to be all over it and add another center of the prospect pool, which I don't think they're opposed to doing. And in Denoyer's case, getting him at a 14th overall, that's exactly the type of position I would want to see him go in, and I think for the Blues, that'd be a pretty great pick. Now, I think the big thing that could keep this pick back is just him being a center. They might go in a different direction. They might even go for a defenseman possibly, but I think Denoyer is going to be something the Blues just love so much that they might be in a position where they can't ignore him. Though I could see a situation where they trade this pick potentially. I didn't want to go for any trades in this video to start out, but later down the line, I think that would be a possibility. Now, at 15th overall, we got the Utah Hockey Club, another team that wanted to improve so much, didn't end up making the playoffs if this continues, at least at this spot. But I think at 15, there's still a lot of prospects that Utah would love to have. Obviously, we know they love to go for big, bulky players, but I think William Moore fits that the most for Utah. I don't know if they're going to go for another defenseman. I kind of contemplated Blake Fiddler at this spot, but Moore is somebody that I think the Utah Hockey Club would love to have in terms of potential in the future. I'm not sure what he'd be at the NHL level because this year he's been on to a substandard start, only 10 points in 14 NTDP games and 2 points in 4 USHL games, but this is somebody I think with a lot of potential. Going to Boston College, he's somebody that can use his frame very well, is smart with how he uses his body and drives the net. He's somebody that I like a lot, but I think needs to learn a lot more of the subtleties of the game before he's an NHLer. I think he'll require a lot of patience, but if he does make it, could be something special. But I think for Utah in this position, they're just going to ask who's the best player who can use his body so well and use that physicality to his advantage at 15th overall, and I think Moore is probably the best selection at that position. Now going on to our last pick in the mock draft here at 16th overall, we have yet another team that has 2 picks inside the top 16 in the Chicago Blackhawks. They end up getting the Toronto Maple Leafs pick, and we saw the Flyers get 2nd overall and 12th overall as well. For Chicago, they get 4th and 16th, and we already saw them draft Roger McQueen, but I think they're going to to go for another forward, and another big forward, and I think it's going to be Jakob Ihs-Wozniak. Now, Roger McQueen's 6'5", Ihs-Wozniak is 6'3", and I think they have pretty different profiles, though, even as bigger players. I think in Ihs-Wozniak's case, he's somebody that can learn to use his offense and physical pressure a little bit more effectively, but he's somebody that in the junior 20 level, I think just has a lot more to give. He's somebody that has had a decent start, 16 points, 5 goals in 13 games. I think the real value, though, is going to be the goal scoring and the instincts that he has there. He's somebody that, especially on the power play, I think is going to be a prolific player. And I think especially alongside some of the playmakers they have coming up, will be perfect on the wings there. I think in Ihs-Wozniak's case, he's much more of a complementary piece and a goal scoring complementary piece, middle six guy than Roger McQueen. But I think he's maybe a little more likely to make the NHL and be an effective NHLer, find his role there. At least in Ihs-Wozniak's case, it's a lot more clear. It's going to be more of a power play specialist role, but I think for Chicago, they could use that in their pool as well. But I could see a situation by season's end, if he continues this substandard start, then he might end up dropping out past the top 16. If that's the case, I could see them going for different players. Ivan Ryabkin is somebody that also dropped that I didn't have in this list because of his poor start. We'll have to wait and see. But that is my early top 16 for the 2025 NHL draft, and I hope you guys did enjoy an early look into the draft class, and we'll see where everybody goes by the season's end. But it's always fun to start up the year and see what could happen in the draft this season. But I'd love your thoughts down below on my top 16. What you guys think? Would you agree? What you disagree with? And what would your top picks look like? Who do you think goes number one? Is there a conversation between Hagens, Martone? Is there Misa in that conversation too? I'd love your thoughts down below on that. And of course, should have video for all the hockey fans you guys know online. Get it out there to them and click on this card for all of my hockey prospect talk in one playlist. And I will see you guys in the next one. Have a fantastic hockey day and goodbye.